As leaders in the automotive industry, we all know how important it is to hit our numbers. We all know how the target, the goals, everything that kind of drives the ship. We also know how important it is to kind of make sure that the dealership is running smoothly. All this comes from accountability, right? It's one of my favorite topics, something that I get asked about all the time. But without accountability, even the best laid plans, they fall flat. There's no way to keep things rolling smoothly without some accountability. Today, I'm going to share some tips and tricks I've figured out over the last almost 20 years in running some of the highest performing dealerships in the country and having almost 4 dozen people promoted underneath of me. So stay tuned.
Let's go. Come on. Come on. Left foot in heavy metal, left foot up on the pedal wall. Now let's go. Hold on tight and never let go. Cause you know what.
All right, so on this channel so far, we've covered emotional intelligence and we've covered leadership development. But without accountability, none of it matters, right? Accountability is kind of the foundation that puts all that into place. It's critical for the development of the dealership to have accountability. Accountability ties all that into together, makes the dealership stronger, and allows you to hit the performance numbers a little bit easier and better. So you may be asking, what's accountability even matter? All right, like I said, over the last almost 20 years, this is my bread and butter. This is something I get asked about all the time, about the accountability, how to hold somebody accountable.
Somewhat accountable.
Well, it holds everything together. It ensures consistency. It ensures that month after month, you're hitting your numbers, you're hitting your targets, you're focusing on what's important. Accountability ties everything together. And without accountability, the dealership is in a mess, right? It's not going to hit its numbers. It's just kind of floating by. You've got to hold people accountable. And that goes from the top down. But accountability is not all about performance.
Coffee's for closers only.
Okay? Like we talked about in the emotional intelligence video, it's all about trust. Accountability develops and builds trust. How's accountability build trust? Accountability builds trust because when your team knows what's expected of them, then it builds confidence in them from the top down and allows them to portray the confidence to everyone around them. All right. The dealership, when it's working smoothly, when it's working together, when it's working as one unit, it's because accountability is there. Leaders are holding each other accountable, salespeople are holding themselves accountable, and then the whole group is holding themselves accountable. Focus on what the end game is. Stephen Covey once said, accountability breeds responsibility. Control what you can control. Covey's point is spot on here. When you create that culture of accountability, then your team knows what's expected of them. And then they start acting proactively instead of reactively, meaning that now the team is actually focused on accomplishing goals that leads to huge success within the dealership. They start taking ownership of their own roles. And here's the thing we've mentioned before. Leadership's more than just about managing people. It's about empowering people. It's about making them feel like they're part of the team. By making them feel like they're part of the team, that's where accountability kind of falls into place. If they feel that they have control over their role, and everybody's focused on taking care of what they can control, that's where accountability really starts to shine. And that's when dealerships start to hit their numbers and their targets. And that's when you start developing leaders. That's when you start making it to where you are finding the next one up, right? My goal was always to try to find the next person up, the next person that could be the leader of the ship, right? And that's where accountability falls in. When you create that culture of accountability, what you'll start to notice is that your salespeople and the team all around you, right, from all departments, they're now focused and everybody is focused on one goal. You'll see that your team steps up in ways you never even dreamed possible. And here's another point, okay? Accountability doesn't just help your team, it drives results. Leadership coach Thomas S. Monson once said, when performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured and tracked, though, the rate of improvement accelerates, which is what we want. We want to see rapid improvement always, but think about it. It doesn't work that way if everybody's not on the same page. Holding each other accountable and not just holding your salespeople accountable, or the managers underneath you accountable, but holding everybody accountable, that's when you start building this culture of accountability. And when you're tracking those results, you're able to go ahead and use those to get better feedback. Creating accountability, man, that's not easy, right? It's not an easy job, right? I find three main barriers when I'm working with dealerships. The first one's unclear expectations. Your team needs to know what's expected of them and that the performance is being measured. If your team doesn't know what they're responsible for and that they don't think that it's actually being tracked and measured, then accountability just doesn't work. The second one is fear of conflict, right? Like we talked about in our emotional intelligence video. A lot of managers avoid talking to their salespeople or the managers underneath them because they're afraid of conflict. They're afraid how it's going to act. Well, if it's done constructively, right? If it's done in a way that builds the person up instead of breaking them down, then what it does is it leads to growth, not conflict. It leads to growth. And finally is follow through. That should be an easy one, but it's not. It's something I see dealerships struggle with all the time. Right? The best laid plans need to be still followed through. Like we've touched in almost every video, without proper follow through, none of it sticks. Accountability is the glue that ties commitment to the results. Harvard Business Review summed this up perfectly. Accountability is what turns commitment into results. Accountability ensures that commitments turn into action, right? If your team knows that they're being tracked and there's follow through in all of it, then it ties their work into real measurable results. Simple enough. Okay, so the first step is to set some clear, measurable results. We've all heard of SMART goals. It's critical that your team knows what they're working toward and how the progress is going to be tracked. For example, instead of saying we need to sell more cars, let's break it down a little bit more. Like we need to sell 100 cars with 20% of those coming from referrals or repeat business. When you set specific measurable goals, there's no room for confusion. What this leads to is clear measurable goals, and clear measurable goals are the foundation to everything. All right, and accountability is not just a one-time thing. You need to have regular check-ins. So you can do these on weekly one-on-ones, or as I train when I go into dealerships and when I ran dealerships in the past, is I like to have daily team meetings. Okay, these team meetings don't need to be long. 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever you think, immediately after the sales meeting. What this does is allows you to go ahead and meet with your team on a more individual basis. You may be able to find some things out that you didn't know. You can address any kind of roadblocks and anything that's getting in the way and hurting the development of your team and your ship. And this is where accountability really comes into play. It's not enough to set the goals if you're not going back and revisiting it. All those are goals. Goals need to be tracked and you need to revisit them to check your progress to see where you're at with it. I recommend using a simple performance tracking tool, something like this, where you and your team can visually see some progress, right? This makes it easier to hold everyone accountable because data doesn't lie. It's math, not magic. And third, make sure accountability flows both ways, right? From the top down. Leaders need to hold themselves accountable too. As we cover in our emotional intelligence videos, if your team sees that you're owning up to when you make a mistake or when there's things just not going right, then it builds trust in your team with you, right? So set the standard and encourage peer accountability as well. Encourage your managers to hold each other accountable and your salespeople to hold each other accountable and the team to hold themselves accountable. With everyone holding each other accountable, then allows for success, right? But at the end, remember, control what you can control. You can only control what you can control. You can't control what he's doing or she's doing or anybody else. But by everybody holding each other accountable, that's a peer accountability. And with peer accountability, it allows for growth. And finally, man, celebrate those wins and those losses, right? When you win the day, celebrate those wins. Celebrate them, cheer, make sure that they're brought up in the morning meetings. Make sure that you're celebrating those green days And when you don't hit your goal, when you don't hit your number, when there's a setback, handle this constructively. Like, ask questions. Like, what could you think we could have done differently? What happened, do you think? What went wrong? Focus on building growth inside the store, not beating anybody down. Do this constructively. What this does is build a culture of continuous improvement inside your dealership. All right, so let's talk about some real world examples here. Right? We've talked about what accountability actually is, but now let's actually see how it comes into play. All right, dealership I worked with recently, they were actually struggling to hit their numbers consistently. They ton of talent, amazing amount of talent. As soon as you walk into the place, you feel the talent, but no one was holding each other accountable. So what we did was actually look at the processes and figured out how can we actually implement the processes that we used at our store to grow 800% 2 different times. How can we implement those strategies? We started some regular check-ins. We started tracking the performance better. We started finding little gaps here and there that would make the difference, right? So what happened with this? Well, I can tell you this. In 90 days time, that's it, 3 months time, this dealership's numbers rose 25%. 25%. They started hitting numbers that they hadn't hit in years. Why? Just by implementing some of the strategies we're talking about in this video to hold each other accountable, track, and feedback. Not only that, but the team morale improved tremendously, as you can expect. If everybody's selling cars, everybody's in a lot better mood. If everybody's in a better mood, customers sense that. If the customers sense that, the overall dealership starts to grow. That's the power of accountability. Accountability is not just a concept, guys. Right? It's the fuel that drives your dealership. If you're ready to build a culture of accountability inside your store, then start implementing some of these processes and just watch and see what happens. And remember, accountability connects everything that we've been talking about, from leadership development to emotional intelligence. Everything is connected by accountability. If you've missed any of the other videos I'm talking about, I'll leave the links below. Check them out. And if you're ready for more, I recommend joining the 800% Elite Leaders program. It's where we get a chance to actually dig in with your leaders, with the managers, with your top salespeople. We have weekly meetings where we actually talk about what's going on and what we can do. And it's real time. Instead of just a video training program, this is real time to where we can actually dig in. We can actually take real time and see what is going on right now. Things change daily, especially in our industry. So by being able to dig in, then it allows us to be able to grow and succeed faster, right? That's what it's about. Change, struggle, grow, and succeed. If you have any questions, comments, or need some additional help on any kind of resources or anything, drop me a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe. All right, it doesn't cost you anything, grows the channel, and allows you to get notified when I drop some new leadership tips in here for you to help ensure the continued growth for you and your dealership. Let's create a culture of accountability that drives success. One goal, one team. Win the day.